Hello and welcome to another video. So with some good old Aggro Dragon today. Not much has really changed with the new cards in Aggro Dragon. I mean, OTK Dragon's a thing and we did do a video on that, even if it wasn't an optimized one, but obviously Aggro Dragon's still doing wonderfully in the unlimited format as it is so quick and solid as a deck. Also not extremely cheap. We are only running, I believe, 9 legendaries, which for an unlimited deck is not too bad overall, and all very common legendaries that if any self-respecting Dragon player would probably have. If you guys are interested in checking this out, I will have a link in the description for this deck, but we're going to get right into it and take a look. So we're kicking us off to start with. We are going up against, of course, Forest.
Shall we cross swords? I trust you are here to sing my praises.
Forest is still reasonably popular in the unlimited format, even if it is lacking a little bit these days. Roach Forest still does fairly decently overall, and I wouldn't be surprised if it always does fairly decently, because it is just, of course, Roach Forest, and that is a beautiful sleeve for the opponent there. I'm not sure if that's one I've got or one that you, or which way you get that one, but either way, beautiful.
I'm here, everyone.
And of course, not a bad turn 1 play, especially against Aggro Dragon. I go for a direct counter with 7 Disdain, basically putting something on board that they pretty much are going to want to counter. And really all I can do here is set up. Unfortunately, Aggro Dragon doesn't tend to take full advantage of a ramp setup. It's really more just tempo the board out, get a lot of followers on early, chip in damage wherever possible, and then finish with your big turn 6 hitters. That's really most of the aim for the deck, which if you've watched any Aggro Dragon player before, you would know that that is usually the case. So that's why we go for these kind of really heavy pressured evos where we can just hit face for 4 damage. Heaven's Gate, that's an interesting one. Pity it didn't hit my Dragoon, that would have been an insane play if it did. Would have been able to actually go for 10 damage straight off and probably just would have straight up won the game, to be honest. Actually, yeah, we would have had him perfect lethal if it had have hit the Dragoon. Well, a ward is actually not the biggest deal. These games do tend to go fairly quickly, so we do have a few of them to take a look at. I actually think I probably could have just straight up won if I hadn't have misplayed this slightly, although I think we still managed to get lethal. It's just a little bit more of a roundabout way. I could have literally just went for the White Frost Whisper into the Dark Dragoon and probably just won that way, but I mean, either way, more creative lethal, so why not? For our next opponent, we are going up against Runecraft. Not a shocker, Runecraft, still reasonably common.
I guess you're looking for a fight.
Honestly, a lot of the decks that you'll see in most of my videos are usually pretty common to the latter. It's what I fight probably 9 times out of 10 majority. There are the very few off-the-wall decks that you spot, but usually I try to avoid including them too much, or I only include them if they are really interesting. Otherwise, it's more about showing off the deck I'm using and not so much worrying about the matchups themselves, as showing off how a deck functions is usually more important, since most decks aren't designed to straight up counter anything. It's designed to be a decent deck overall. If it is a counter deck, of course, I usually do tend to try and focus on the matchups that it is good against. So, early sword plays are not the matches I'm looking for, though. Sorry guys, while I was off on that little tangent talking about stuff, I realized that we weren't actually using DragonCraft. That was the next video that I am prepping up for you guys, which will be Rotation Swordcraft. So, unfortunately, I had these back-to-back set up, so the Dragon match that against Rune actually backed straight onto a Sword match against Rune. So, that's a little sneak preview for next time. Anyway, now that we are back on track, we have the Righteous Dragoon, Poseidon, and White Frost, along with the Dragon Summoner. Is actually a fairly decent early game, all 2 drops, and 1 3-drop to curve us out nicely into turn 2 through 4. Dragon Summoners should do a pretty decent job of stocking up our hand, and White Frost is a pretty decent counter card. This deck in particular does great against these Runecraft decks in particular, of course. I mean, Runecraft's slower, this deck's faster. You can do the math there. So Righteous Dragoon, of course, Dragon's Handspurs, pretty much always the pick in this match, unless you are going up against Blood, in which case, sometimes taking the 1-drop clears are better. Same situation for Forest, sometimes, it really depends on how heavily they're swarming you. So our turn 4 was just stocking us up. Of course, they are going for the Evo. They're just going to bolster the defenses full on here. Actually, not that shocked that that's the way they're going with this. Our opponent's not really going to handle this well. We're going to be able to clear both of these, get 3 damage to face and the extra 2 from the followers, and set ourselves up pretty nicely for a Phoenix Rider too if we want it. Although, considering this Daria play, Phoenix Rider may not be the best. Really does depend on how they handle the rest of this turn. I mean, that was a respectable choice. Not the choice I probably would have went with, maybe. I don't know. Hard to say. It depends on what they had in hand. But Daria player typically don't want to just play Daria on its own when you're doing that. It does seem like a bit of a risk. Unless they were just completely bricked, which is always a possibility when you're playing Daria Rune. So we decide to go wide here. Trying to get as much as we can onto the board. Obviously not holding much because they pretty much wiped out that entire turn. At least the advantage we have now is the fact that we did manage to stick those down a bit and force remove them. So it should be harder again to remove everything we're throwing down now. And we're still going to get another 4 damage. So the Phoenix Rider is really our big setup. If we can get that on board, we should be able to win. And even if we don't, and they just leave all this, we could still win. So really wasn't going to matter either way. And they realized that pretty abruptly. And for the last game we're going to look at, we are going to be playing against Havencraft. Again, I do apologize for the Swordcraft interruption. That really was not intentional. Can't believe that ended up sneaking past my eyes while I was looking at them. No surprise though, considering again, they were back to back. But starting off this hand is pretty okay. I mean, they're a little high with the Poseidon and stuff, but overall we might be able to make do with these cards. Especially with this, of course, swap out the Righteous Dragoon. Works well, and Goblin turn 1, you can't ask for much better than that in this deck. Globe of Stairways, not really an issue. Drawing a Countdown Amulet shouldn't be a problem for us. Of course, this deck is focused on being aggressive. It is aggro dragon, so throwing down a 2-drop like that, not an issue, even if we lose it. At least we're actually forcing things to be played now. Now, of course, wasting their turn 2 just for removal did let us chip in a little bit more damage, so why not? Now it's our chance to push some more and hopefully get some draw even with this Disciple of Disdain. Since we've still got Servant of Disdain and Disdainful Rend, which will be more than enough to, of course, trigger it. So, Holy Mage Haven, I haven't actually seen one for a while, but it is a really competent deck normally. It just really suffers in this kind of matchup, since it does err on the slower side again. So I decided to take Disdainful Rending and, of course, the Serpent so that we could get more damage in. Since potentially we're looking at a pretty insane board, and if we end up getting a Phoenix, even more insane. Fortunately though, Forbidden Ritual, not the card you want to see go down. Luckily for us though, a Dragon Forte is playable, and with the Evo we have just enough to go for the, of course, perfect turn 6 lethal that we are after. So if you're ever looking for a deck that should pretty much always be good in the unlimited meta, Aggro Dragon is always one you can rely on. I use it quite regularly to complete missions, or if I'm just looking for really fast games, because it does tend to hold itself very well in almost any unlimited format. I don't see that changing really anytime soon. I expect to have at least another probably expansion or 2 before Aggro Dragon really sees any kind of change, provided we don't get nerfed, of course. Poseidon nerf probably wouldn't make much difference because they'd be nerfing the big body if they ever went for a Poseidon nerf. Everything else in the deck though, I'm very unlikely to ever see any changes to now. Most of them, if they have already been changed, and some of them haven't, but honestly, just a solid deck and can win you easily over 50% of your matches. A really good one if you're looking to also grind out quick games. As long as nothing really comes around to counter this in the future, it really should last quite a while. So if you guys did enjoy this video, hit the like button and subscribe. You'll find the deck list in the description below. Until next time, guys, see ya.